Friends, welcome to year 4 of Camp Kaiju. Now, the next number of episodes may sound a little different because they were recorded in previous seasons as exclusive Patreon content. So why release them now to the masses instead of recording just new episodes? Well, if you didn't know already, my wife and I welcomed a baby girl into our lives, and as such, Camp Kaiju must go into hibernation while I focus my efforts on bringing up that fearsome little monster kid. And until the podcast returns with new episodes, you can still get caught up on all the great monster movie talk at our website, campkaijumoviereviews.com, Letterboxd, Instagram, and Facebook. Matt and I are still gonna engage with you all there. You can find links in the bio. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all for your ratings and reviews. Thank you, patrons, for your above and beyond support for this show. Talking monster movies with you all has been an absolute joy. Producing this podcast has been an absolute thrill, and I hope to get back to it soon. Until then, be well, stay in touch, and stay campy. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Camp Kaiju Monster Movie Reviews. We're so happy to have you for a special episode. We are your hosts, Vincent, Hannam,
and Matt Levine.
And we're talking about all our favorite monster movies, the good, the bad, and the downright campy, and asking if they stand the test of time. Traditional kaiju creature feature space invaders, the supernatural, and everything in between. All strange beasts welcome here. We are going to have a fun little chat here talking about short features. Well, that's an oxymoron. Short movies featuring some monsters.
Indeed, yeah.
So for these 3 movies, A Trip to the Moon, Papillon d'Amour, and Bambi Meets Godzilla, we'll spend probably around 10 minutes on each film. We'll give you a little background on the history, on the legacy, and we'll do our normal breakdown and give it a rating like any other episode.
Cool. Sounds great.
All right. So should we start with A Trip to the Moon?
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
All right. Seems like you did a lot of this research, and you have the master's degree in film. So...
And I'm really fascinated by this time period as well. It's kind of like the foundations of the art form, you know. It's a very exciting time in cinema history. So, all right, yeah. So, A Trip to the Moon from 1902, a hugely influential movie in the history of science fiction, fantasy. Kind of laying the groundwork a little bit for many of the sort of fantastic special effects, which look very different later on in cinema history, but do kind of go back not only to A Trip to the Moon, but to the filmmaker Georges Méliès in general. Georges Méliès was the son of a shoemaker. He came from a pretty wealthy family, but he left the family business, I think, in the 1880s, because he was always fascinated by magic and theater and kind of all these spectacular effects that he wanted to achieve. And he always had kind of like a childlike fascination with the sense of wonder that like this kind of, fantastic genre could give to audiences. So he owned a theater, I think as far back as the 1880s. And in the theater that he owned in 1895, the Lumiere brothers demonstrated this fantastic new invention that they had where they projected a film. It was one of the first public projections of cinema in history, basically in 1895. So Méliès, like many other people, were fascinated by this new invention, like, still photographs coming to life, this illusion of reality happening right in front of your very eyes. So on that night, December 28th, 1895, which, it's very hard to have sort of like a start date for cinema because like before that, there were like all these different visual toys, different kind of like, where you would look through a viewfinder and like spin the carousel around. That might have been like sort of a precursor to the kind of films that the Lumiere brothers showed in 1895. But for all intents and purposes, that kind of was the birth of cinema in the sense of a film projected before a live audience.
Hmm.
So Méliès asked the Lumiere brothers, how do I get my hands on this invention? It's amazing. I want to see what I can do with it. And the Lumiere brothers, being sort of clever, business people in addition to artists, were like, no, we're not going to let you, we're not going to give this to you. We're not going to let you know how we did it. Méliès eventually figured out how to get a projector. I think he got one from London because a lot of other people in Europe were trying to figure out how to do this at the same time. So he got a projector from London or somewhere in England, and he figured out how to make a camera out of it, like just out of his own sort of like technical mastery, basically. He started making films in the late 1890s, but when he first started, they weren't really all that different from the Lumiere brothers, where it was kind of just like setting up a camera and having like a scene play out. It might have been like, with the Lumiere brothers, famous examples are just like a train arriving at a station or like employees leaving a factory, like slices of life like that. It wasn't until Méliès, I believe in 1902. No, it must have been earlier than that. It might have been like right around 1900. He was filming a street scene. A bus was passing in front of the camera. The camera jammed, and he had to kind of like, get it back on track. And then when he started filming again, and then projected the film back later, it looked like the bus that he was filming turned into a hearse before his very eyes, but like the movement was seamless. So he was like, this is a magic trick. Like, look at these amazing things that you can do with this new invention. This is kind of a long lead up to say that Méliès is seen as like the creator of narrative fantasy films. And I think, again, like we could complicate that a little bit. I think the Lumiere brothers did tell stories in their early movies as well, so it's not entirely Méliès's creation. But yeah, certainly for sure, he came up with these fantastic stories of witches and magicians and like fantastic creatures that would appear before your very eyes through, in-camera tricks where he would stop filming and then replace whatever was in front of the camera and do like through clever editing and like, very careful choreography. It seemed like these impossible effects were happening. So, A Trip to the Moon, 1902. That was maybe like 5 years into him making these movies.
And Matt,
And
is it fair to say he, if not created, maybe he did invent a lot of the editing that we take for granted, or did he perfect it, like dissolves and fades? Was that him messing around with the camera and coming up with these effects?
yeah, I think it is fair to say that, especially in terms of like visual effects that nobody had ever attempted before. I think in terms of editing, you also have Edwin S. Porter around the same time. He had the movie The Great Train Robbery from 1903, so
Oh,
just a
sure.
year after A Trip to the Moon,
Hmm.
where, there is some fairly complicated cross-cutting where there's like a pretty involved story that's being told in that movie.
Hmm.
Edwin S. Porter also has a movie called Life of an American Fireman. That is from, I think, the same year as A Trip to the Moon, where this is kind of an involved story, sorry, but like uh Edwin S. Porter shot various angles and various versions of different scenes, and the projectionists themselves could kind of like cut the film together and show whatever version they thought was best for their audience.
Hmm.
So there was a lot of experimentation going on. There was a lot of innovation in terms of like how to tell a story, how to convey a sense of space and time on film. But I do think it's fair to say that Méliès made the art form leap forward quite a bit with like these magic visions that you could achieve.
And and we'll get to the film itself, but I think it's so fortuitous, like what, like the man who created or perfected the illusion of film that we know and love himself was a magician. I think it almost like had to have been a magician to do this kind of work. And if it weren't for him and his unique background, who knows how long it would have taken for people to just figure it out, because they
Right.
weren't thinking the same way Méliès was.
Yeah, I think that's true. I do think part of the appeal for early cinema was that it was kind of like a magic act. Like I think, audience like there's the legendary story that when the Lumiere brothers first showed Arrival of a Train at La Ciotat from 1896, it was like the illusion of depth because we see this tiny speck of a train just like racing towards the audience. And the legend goes that like the audience members like ran out of the theater because they thought they were going to be ran over by this train. So I think like this sense that it was a magic trick, that it was like an optical illusion where like they didn't know what was happening and how it was achieved. I think that story is somewhat apocryphal. I think there had been enough like inventions before then that audiences probably kind of knew what was going on. But still, there was a sense of magic and a sense of wonder that was like pervasive in cinema at that time.
Yeah. So then Méliès makes A Trip to the Moon, which is like just insane. It's just nobody ever seen anything like this before.
Right. It was mind-boggling. Yeah. I mean, like it was his biggest production to date. It took I think 3 months to make, which at that time was a very long time. Because Méliès made more than 500 movies throughout his career. Like he was just peddling them out all the time, basically, and they didn't really take all that long to make for the most part.
Right.
But A Trip to the Moon did. I mean, 3 months was a long time. It cost 10,000 francs, I think, which again was a huge amount at that time.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was a pretty involved story and production. Like a lot of different sets were created in his soundstage. Lots of different costumes, lots of actors, relatively speaking, for the time. So a huge undertaking for sure.
And it's only 15 minutes long.
Right. And even then, like, projectionists could kind of like crank the projectors at different speeds and like could even like cut scenes out if they wanted to. Like projectionists had a weird amount of control over like what they presented to their audience at the time. It was sort of just like a Wild West at that time.
Huh.
So yeah, like technically it is like about like 13 minutes, right?
I
15, 13, 15.
well, 15 maybe with extra credit. Like
Yeah,
the version on HBO Max is 15 minutes,
gotcha. Yeah.
but there's, some title cards in the beginning and end.
Yeah, gotcha. So yeah, and there was like a little bit of variation on that, even when it was initially screened. Like that could kind of vary a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, it was hugely popular, and there were remakes or sort of like rip-offs is probably a better word for it. Like all over, like
Yeah.
in the United States, all throughout Europe.
Edison.
Like yeah,
Edison in
exactly.
his wily ways was bootlegging this thing and selling it as his own.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. But yeah, so it was there probably weren't really blockbusters at this time, but if there were, this was maybe the first one.
Yeah, and I think it's important to talk about the restoration history, which isn't very old. Like that's not
Yeah.
ancient within our own lifetime. The In Méliès' time, color film was not uncommon. It wasn't filmed on color film stock like what would become. No, this would be hand painted. People would go in and hand paint the frame itself.
Yeah.
Huge time suck.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed. And in doing some research about this, I read about this factory owned by Elizabeth and Berta Tuier. My French pronunciation is horrible. I apologize. But these two women had like a factory with more than 200 technicians who would be like hand painting each frame. And each of the technicians would be responsible for a specific color. And it was very much an assembly line where like one person would like paint one color on the frame, then it would go down the line. So yeah, this was a huge kind of industry at the time.
Yeah, and so all that to say, the the film itself, correct me if I'm wrong, was more or less forgotten, right? Because it was one of thousands of short movies that were being made at the time. But it was rediscovered in 1930 when there was a general reappraisal of Méliès' influence on film history. But there were no surviving color prints of the film until one was discovered by a film collector, donated his collection in Barcelona in 1993. And suddenly a lost color print of A Trip to the Moon was found, but it was in complete shambles. Is there a more technical way to put that?
I don't think so. I mean, like I heard it compared to a hockey puck. Like the celluloid had like shrunk and it had decayed to an extent that it was like stuck together, and they didn't think that they would be able to salvage it.
Right. They didn't even think they could get it together. And I can't even fathom the painstaking labor to slowly pull that apart and then digitize it. And what I love in this story, so This was discovered in 1993. It took how many years to digitize it, put
So
it
I
together?
I think their efforts really started in 1999. Like it kind of sat around for a couple years, and then there were a few French, I think movie producers. I can find out their names, but they learned that this Barcelona film museum basically had this old print. So like in 1999, they started working on it, and then I think it took until like 2011 was like when they premiered their new restored version of it. So basically 12 years.
At the Cannes Film Festival.
Yeah, indeed.
Did I say that right?
Yeah, can
Cannes?
yeah.
French. No, but the one little tidbit about that is they were able to digitize the film, but then it sat on a computer for 8 years because they didn't have the technology yet to then do what they needed to do. And that just blows my mind where it's like, as an artist, you're like, eventually we'll have the technology. So let's just hold it on ice till then. It's like, whoa, you don't know how long it's going to take. And it took 8 years. Mind boggling, the commitment to this thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It gives you such great respect for people that are restoring film, like yeah, it's a huge undertaking and digitizing film is it like kind of a controversial thing, like is celluloid preferred or is digitizing it better? But like it's complicated, of course, and like sometimes with a film print like this, you have to digitize it in order to show it at all. So, that's an amazing thing to rescue something like this and now we have this experience where we can watch this glorious hand painted color print of this movie that's 121 years old.
Right. And that's the print that's streaming at least on Max right now. That's what I watched for this. They did properly restore the black and white version as well, which is available online. Um, I think there are pros and cons, right? I mean, this is all our entire conversation is going to be with tremendous love for the project. But Matt, if you're okay, just going into our breakdowns.
Yeah, for sure.
I am okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I took some notes. It's so great too that it's 15 minutes because you can just rewatch it over and
Yeah.
over again. Um, I really liked if you talk about themes, there are two themes maybe that come to mind. The theme of colonization, which certainly a product of its time, 1902, which is also a fascinating time capsule that the film presents. But I love in the beginning that this is kind of campy too, that there's like a team of scientists and they're all dressed like wizards. And, can you read into that as a sort of a mockery of the scientific elite? And then campy, I'll get to it later. But um I like and this is specific to this restored version. I like the music, and it's by a French band called Air. But I think it adds a sort of a kookiness, but also a mystery to the adventure that I found worth it. Yeah, that was good.
Yeah. I agree. I like that soundtrack a lot. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, not to go too much into the history of film projection at the time, but like it was kind of like there were a lot of so not only did you have like different music that could be played, Méliès did have like scores that he sent out with the film, but the
Oh,
projectionists could just not play that. They could play something else. And also in a lot of movie theaters, you had like a live narrator who would be like talking to the audience while the film was being screened.
hmm.
So there are just like countless ways that this movie might have been experienced by audiences at the time in 1902.
Hmm.
But yeah, seeing it in this way with like the new air score and the newly, colorized print or newly restored color print, it looks gorgeous and it sounds great. It's
Yeah,
feel like we're lucky to have something like this.
yeah. And the set design, I just love like the sets. It's clear Méliès has a background in theater, with the moving sets, and you can picture this on a vaudeville stage, let alone being filmed. So it's
Yeah,
really cool.
absolutely. Yeah. It's uh so yeah, when I was in school, when I was studying film in school, I read a little bit about the cinema of attractions, which is how kind of like early cinema was referred to, where like a cohesive narrative and like in-depth characters were kind of irrelevant. Like that was not why people went to see movies. It was more like presenting these fantastic visions. Méliès was like the most extreme example of that, but like most movies at the time did a similar thing where it was like showing amazing things to the audience. And yeah, like in watching them nowadays, it's kind of jarring because we kind of do, for the most part, expect story and character and like a cohesive theme or whatever from movies. And that's not at all what these early films were trying to do, which I think is fascinating, although it can be like you kind of watch it from a distance. You're not really like fully absorbed in the film, you know? It's just such a unique time period where, like the rules or whatever of narrative filmmaking probably wouldn't really be like firmly entrenched for another like 10 or 15 years, maybe 10 years.
Yeah.
So it's, like it's not like I think the movie is really imaginative. It's very playful, it's very funny at times. But it's not like an exciting story that we get wrapped up in. I think like the pacing is kind of weird because the first 5 minutes or so, it's kind of a long time. Then we're just watching like maybe two or three static shots of all of these wizard slash scientists just sort of like hamming it up and making these broad gestures. And it's like, we don't know who any of these people are. We don't know exactly what's going on, although they're kind of planning out their trajectory to the moon or whatever. So, yeah, like it's hard to really experience it as like an engaging story. But if you're looking at it as like a sign of the creativity that was so rampant in cinema at the time, it's so fascinating. And I like, yeah. So then I think at like the 6 or 7 minute mark when we have these like lunar creatures popping up and these strange mushrooms and like these people that are like supposed to be like the stars and the moon and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
Like one of the most famous images in film history, like the man in the moon, the face that gets hit in the eye with the rocket. All that stuff is just exhilarating, you know?
Yeah. And I love that the moon, is coming closer and closer to the camera. And I realized we're watching it from the point of view of the rocket. It's not actually the moon coming closer and closer. It's the rocket getting closer and closer. But I think the way the effects plays out, it looks like the opposite. But
Yeah.
that's an exciting moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Especially like I can't even imagine how exciting it was for audiences at the time who probably had never really seen anything like that, you know?
Yeah. And I do love the aliens, and this is a monster movie podcast, so we got to talk about those guys. But
Yeah.
I think the costume design is wicked, and I mean that like in a cool way, but also a devilish way. They've got like these lobster claws, and they have spears, and they don't seem to be wanting to play nice with the European would-be conquerors.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed. And like the actors playing those creatures like seem to be like acrobats or gymnasts or something because they have these very strange movements. Like they're flipping, they're somersaulting, they're doing all these strange, yeah, athletic things. It's a lot of fun to watch, yeah.
Yeah, good point about the physicality. It's a highlight of the film, those
Yeah,
creatures.
definitely, yeah. And yeah, like there's this cool effect where like the colonizers, the European scientists or whatever, when they attack the creatures, they like hit them with an umbrella and they just like vanish into a puff of smoke.
Yeah.
And it's pretty well done. Like it was just a simple effect where like they would stop, cranking the camera. All the actors would like stay as still as possible, and then like the actor playing the creature would leave, and then like they would have like a smoke effect, and they would start filming again. But it looks great, and like it's that's the kind of in-camera practical effects that we've talked about a lot on the podcast that I really love.
Right. And it's that kind of like imagination to even think about that because film was so new and a science fiction fantasy epic had never been done before. Like, what possessed Méliès to get that image in his mind? He's like, you know what? I've never seen this done, but I have this image of an alien blowing up into smoke. Let's do it. And all the actors are like, really? We've been here for all day. You put like 20 of these smoke effects into the movie. We have to stop every time. But Méliès, the perfectionist, illusionist, was like, we got to do it.
Yeah.
And it's that level of dedication that makes this film so memorable.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think Méliès is often referred to as like film's first auteur because he wrote, designed, edited, shot, starred in, like did every step of the process, you know? And I think again you could complicate that a little bit and say the Lumiere brothers or Edward Porter or whoever, but like yeah, the level that he like had a vision and would not stop until he achieved that vision, like that's a sign of the greatest cinema artists of all time, you know?
Yeah. Oh man, this is so great. Good for him.
I think those scientist wizards or whatever they are, like they really ham it up as much as possible. And that is like the acting style that was prevalent in movies at the time where they, were like the broadest possible gestures to the audience. But like looking at it nowadays, it does not seem at all like real human behavior. And it's one of the most fascinating things about the movie, but also like um yeah, campy to the extreme in the sense that like those cannot be like real characters in like any sense that we know humans to behave, you know?
Yeah. A couple of things that just made me laugh in the movie, and this is like me watching this as a time capsule, and I'm like, oh, even in 1902, if you have a scientist in a movie, they're gonna have an attractive female assistant. So
And here they have like a whole army of attractive female assistants. Yeah.
long-legged, they're in like bathing suits, and they're rolling out the cannon and the rocket ship.
Yeah, of course it's totally ridiculous that all these scientists would just like walk into a rocket and like those female assistants just like push it into like the launch pad or whatever. Like, of course it's ridiculous, but it's so fun. It's great.
These tropes have been around forever. Also, one of the first thing the scientists do when they get to the moon is just go to sleep.
Yeah.
Let's roll out the sleeping bags, and they nap.
Yeah, because apparently they can breathe on the moon, of course. Makes sense.
Yeah. And then they're dreaming of women.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, like I think like the first half of the movie is like, oh, this is interesting from a time capsule point of view. And then the moment when they go into that subterranean cave and that mushroom grows like several feet or whatever, and then like one of the lunar creatures comes out from behind it, that's the moment where I'm like, whoa, like my mind is blown. What's going on here, you know? In like one moment, it goes from like a time capsule to like honestly a very transportive and like kind of mind-blowing experience, you know?
Yeah, a movie. Like we all the kinds of movies we love, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
All right. Does this movie stand the test of time? Or is it completely forgettable?
Oh, it's an all-time classic. I mean, if only for the ways that it influenced science fiction and fantasy and just cinema in general for the next 100+ years, it's an all-time classic for sure.
Yeah, I think it stands the test of time and is a bona fide classic.
Yeah. And that's not to say it's like entertaining every step of the way, and like you kind of do have to have in your mind like this is going to be a slightly different experience than most movies we watch nowadays, but that's also one of the things that makes it so fascinating, you know?
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Robert Osborne, and welcome. It's certainly no secret that today, July 20th, marks the 40th anniversary of one of the really great achievements of mankind, the first manned mission to the surface of the moon. It's an anniversary we've been celebrating all day today, and we're going to continue to do so into the wee hours of tomorrow with more films about space travel. And to make our festival particularly special, I'm very happy to say that I'm joined right now by the man who was the lunar module pilot when Neil Armstrong landed the Eagle on Tranquility Base, became the second man to walk on the moon, Dr. Buzz Aldrin. Welcome, Buzz.
Thanks, Robert. It's great to be here on this special day.
We're very happy to have you here. I also want to congratulate Dr. Aldrin on this new book he's written, which is called Magnificent Desolation, The Long Road Home from the Moon, which is all about his adventures in space. And since he is one of the few among us who can speak with authority about space travel, we thought he'd be a perfect co-host for the space travel films we have coming up. Well, up first, he's going to help me introduce the very first movie ever made about space travel. And not only that, it's one of the first movies ever made, period. It's A Trip to the Moon from director Georges Méliès in 1902. Now, this
Wow.
is an incredible film, but you're an incredible man. And on this great anniversary, we know how we feel about the 40th anniversary. What do you feel? What are you thinking at this point?
Well, it was indeed a magical time, a pioneering time. And whenever you're pioneering something, a degree of brilliance comes out and joins together because it's so fascinating, so new, and novel ideas are looked at and they're put together. And I'm truly amazed when I look back and see the events that went from Sputnik to the president saying we're going to go to the moon, and then we got there in a little over eight and a half years, and how we did that. I'm sure we'll be talking about that when some of these other films come up.
What are your impressions of this film?
Well, you know, this film came out 1 year before the Wright brothers did.
Yes, exactly.
And 1 year before my mother was born. Well, it needs to be looked at, not as people viewed it back in 1902, but as people today view it, as something that was going through the minds of people back then. And really, it was sort of amazing or almost, well, an impossible thing to even think about. A dream, a fantasy, and how they can possibly do it. And, of course, they entered in all sorts of inaccuracies about getting on the moon, and they didn't pay very much attention to how you get back either.
Right. That's very funny. So let's see how the filmmakers did it. Here is the film, written, produced, directed by, and starring Georges Méliès from 1902, A Trip to the Moon.
So, with that said, let's talk about our second short here that we're going to feature. And this one is 4 minutes in length, and it's from 102 years later, 2004's Papillon d'Amour. And this was your pick. So, yeah, tell us about that one.
Yeah, so I saw this movie a long time ago when I was an undergrad in film school at UW-Milwaukee. It's kind of an experimental avant-garde movie where the director, Nicolas Provost, takes found footage. The movie Rashomon by Akira Kurosawa from 1950. He basically cuts the image down the middle vertically, and then he does like a mirroring effect. He adds some very abrasive music to it, and he kind of turns it into this extremely harsh, but I think beautiful and very poetic depiction, I guess, a very expressionistic depiction of a woman going through extreme suffering or grief or heartache. And in the movie Rashomon, the plot is that like she is a woman who is raped and then her husband is murdered. But in Papillon d'Amour, we don't necessarily know that. So it's kind of just a more general depiction of, you know, human suffering, basically. But I do think, you know, she seems monstrous physically and visually because she does not look human for a lot of the movie. It's kind of like this amorphous blob that's moving in like a very bizarre way because she's cut in half visually. But you know, the movie sympathizes with her at the same time and is kind of showing, you know, kind of like the lowest depths that humans can kind of go through, like their worst kind of suffering and despair, basically. So in my opinion, and I'm excited to hear what you think about this movie in particular, but I think it's really beautiful. I think the approach is pretty simple, but I think like the interpretations that you can get out of it are vast and they're, you know, kind of multitudinous, I guess you could say. Yeah, it's a pretty emotional experience, I think.
Yeah, it's a violent experience, and it doesn't start off that way necessarily. You know, okay, here the title is Butterfly of Love. And I watch this movie and I'm thinking, oh, okay, it's a woman. She's turning into a butterfly. There's obviously themes of some sort of transformation, metamorphosis. Great. I was not aware of the Rashomon connection. So I do see four stoic men in the background watching her with no emotion in their faces. And I'm like, okay, great. I could see a relationship here between, you know, gender dynamics, gender roles. And then I'm just fascinated by it's like a kaleidoscope effect of the editing. And then the music is really effective in this film because about halfway through this, like, not genteel, but, you know, soothing kind of music just like turns into like a screamo, harsh, metallic sound that jolted me, and I was scared, and I was like, whoa. So now this feels like a horror movie.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a painful experience, which transformation often is, whatever that means to you in your own life. So yeah, and then it was over, and it was only 4 minutes long, and I was like, whoa. I didn't expect to feel anything with a movie this short. And when it started, I was honestly like, okay, I've seen movies like this at art museums. Great. It's avant-garde. But then it caught me off guard, and I was like, yes, thank you. That's great. So that was my experience watching it.
That's so good to hear. Yeah, this is, I watched a lot of kind of insufferable art movies when I was going to film school, but like some really great ones too. And I think like when it's if it's as visually interesting as this movie, but also seems to have like an emotional sort of like motivation, then that's the best kind of like avant-garde or experimental work, And this one's really good, I think.
Yeah. Go check it out. Matt, you have a great write-up of this film on our website, campkaijumoviereviews.com, that honestly I took all of my research from.
Cool. I'm happy to hear that. That's great.
Our next short that we're going to feature on this bonus episode is even shorter, at less than 2 minutes long, also made at a film school, and also influential. Bambi meets Godzilla. Matt, I'm really interested to hear what you think about this movie, because you were new to it.
Totally new, yeah.
Okay. And I say movie, it is a cartoon, technically.
And very short, like a minute and a half, right?
Yeah.
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 Should I go first, or I can let you sort of
Well, yeah, I'll give more historical context. So it's tongue in cheek, but the film was directed, written, animated, many other things by Marv Newland. It was produced actually by Mr. and Mrs. Newland. And most of the runtime is of the credits rolling over an image of a deer, Bambi, just grazing in the field. And it's very serene. The part of the William Tell overture is playing, so it's very like, oh, very nice and pleasant. The flowers were in the forest. And then right at the end, a giant reptilian foot literally crushes Bambi to death. That is Godzilla. And right when this happens, a musical chord hits, and it's actually the last chord from the Beatles' A Day in the Life song. So again, kind of like Papillon d'Amour, it's just very jarring, and it jolts you, and maybe surprises you a little bit. But the cartoon was a film project by Marv Newland, but it did find life at film screenings around the country. It was even featured on the, I hope I get this right, the video release of Godzilla 1984, featured on the VHS there. So people know it, people have seen it. And this is kind of its claim to fame. It is preserved by the American Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. But it was ranked number 36 out of Jerry Beck's book, The 50 Greatest Cartoons, as selected by 1,000 animation professionals, a book that came out in 1994. So among all the Looney Tunes, all the Disney cartoons, Bambi meets Godzilla as an indie did make the cut, which I find really impressive.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's easy to see why. Like it's a concept that is just like executed perfectly, And it is kind of like a one joke movie. Although the credits are really hilarious. Like I love that like Marv Newland is also credited with providing Bambi's wardrobe. Like that's the sense of humor of this movie, But it is basically a one joke movie, but that's okay if your movie's only a minute and a half long. It's just like perfectly presented,
Yeah.
I think it's hilarious. And I loved the little piece of trivia in the interview that you sent me the link to, where Marv Newland says that he was talking with Terry Gilliam, who started off in Monty Python and then, of course, made a lot of other great movies after that. But like, yeah, Terry Gilliam was inspired by this movie, Bambi versus Godzilla, in some of the Monty Python animations that are featured in, I think it's Holy Grail, Monty Python and the Holy Grail. So
yeah, and you see that in their Flying Circus TV show as well. But like the image of a monstrous Godzilla foot stomping on something started here with Bambi meets Godzilla. So a huge influence in pop culture from this little 90-second cartoon.
Yeah, it's really funny. I mean, like the animation's not like mind-blowingly beautiful or anything, but it doesn't have to be. So, yeah, it's great. I loved it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Papillon d'Amour. Does it stand the test of time? Where would you rank it?
Yeah, for me it does. This is one Papillon d'Amour is like one of my favorite, formalist abstract movies that I've seen. Yeah, for me it definitely stands the test of time. I would call it a classic personally.
Okay. And me not knowing this genre of film, I'll just say, yeah, being one of the few that I've been taken by, I'll say it is a classic and stands the test of time. What about Bambi meets Godzilla?
I gotta say it's a classic too. Like, there are lots of different kinds of classics out there, and they don't have to be like a huge emotional experience or whatever. Like, I think for what Bambi versus Godzilla is trying to do, it's pretty much perfectly done.
Agreed. And I'd seen this before, so I knew what happened to Bambi. Did you know what happens to Bambi?
Yeah, I did. Because I read about this movie before I watched it. So
yeah. But I feel like if you didn't, and even me watching it with fresh eyes, I was surprised because the musical chord is so abrasive that I was a little surprised. I was like, oh, I didn't realize my body was so tense for 90 seconds.
Right, yeah. Yeah, and I thought like the first kind of pleasant shot of Bambi was going to go on a little bit longer, but this movie's so short that it really is unexpected. It happens pretty quickly,
Yeah.
So all three of these shorts are, among classic territory, I would say.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, this was awesome. Thank you all for listening and hanging out. If you liked what you hear, please tell a friend, leave a rating and review, and visit campkaijumoviereviews.com, Instagram or patreon.com/campkaiju for more monster movie content. Patrons, we can't thank you enough. And if you have any suggestions for us, let us know. You can get in touch with us any way you can, including campkaiju@gmail.com. All right, everybody. Until next time, stay campy.